Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name is Stuart. In this video I want to discuss game balance in Warhammer the Old World and where the responsibility lies in making it work.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Baron of Dice, premium wargaming dice. Over 500 styles, over 4,000 customer reviews. Welcome to the best dice on the planet.
Welcome to the Old World. Sound the trumpets and beat the loud drums of war, for the mighty tome you hold in your hands is your key to entering a dark and bloody land. It is the world of demons and sorcery, a brutal era of warfare and conquest. Warhammer the Old World, the game of fantasy battles, brings all the action to your tabletop. You command armies of miniatures in a game that promises bold maneuver, daring riposte, and untold slaughter. As the months go on and the game has been out longer, more factions are released, the talk around what needs to change with the game, what's not working, what's broken, what needs fixing, what factions are unbalanced, and so on. Those noises become louder, and there's some really interesting discussion around that. Sweargaze podcast on YouTube alone is fantastic. Close Order as well, always great for commentary around the competitive scene. The Old World Fanatics podcast, both on YouTube and audio, is really good for that. And weekly, so very current. And I just watched a really good video from Dr. Luke Blacksall covering the topic as well. But I'm trying not to fall down the hole of covering that kind of stuff here in this video. Now, of course, I have opinions on a lot of things covered in those videos. Some things I haven't yet formed opinions of. I've not played as many games as many of those competitive players. I've not yet been to any events. So I'm playing very casually, and I'm conscious of sticking my boot in where it's not really needed. There's lots of voices and noise on the internet around that, and this video is not that. And while I might put a toe into those conversations a little bit with the topic here today, I want to look more of a broader macro overview on how game balance works and the effect it can have on the community as a whole, and whose responsibility it is for achieving it. Now, of course, there may be many people shouting at the screen already, of course it's the game's designers, but I don't think it's quite that simple. We all come to this game with our own perspectives on how we want to play it, and naturally that colours our expectations and our perceptions of the way the game is played. And because of that, I think the answer is going to be different to different people, and that's something I wanted to explore today. Warhammer Fantasy has gone through many changes over the years. We all have our own favourite editions or way of playing, so I'm pretty relaxed about how one rule stacks up against another from a different era. The same goes for factions. Each faction has had its own time at the top, well, some. So while the current meta might be new and access to more army lists through apps like Best Coast Pairings, net lists have existed as long as forums, and discussions around balance and rules are not new. So I'll try mostly to stay away from some of that kind of micro detail. So staying away from those individual examples, what I will say is I like games of Warhammer to look like the pictures they do in all the rule books. The massed armies, big units, rank upon rank of troops, a huge variety of different troops as well. And if games of Warhammer on the tabletop, at our clubs, at our events, in our homes, look like the games that we see in the rule books, then I think we're winning. I'm going to be a little bit presumptuous and suggest that many of you watching this video will agree with me at least that the game looks great when it looks like it does in the pictures in the rule books and the army books, when a game looks like a massed ranks of troops versus massed ranks of troops. And when that's not that case, sometimes it's just down to an army's play style, and some have a unique play style that maybe suits that a little bit less. But on the whole, when we don't see that very often, maybe then there is a little bit of a problem with balance and how that spreads out throughout the community. Now, many people in the community will tell you there is a problem right now, and the game doesn't reflect that. And this is where I do tread by a toe or two, giving a few examples, but I'm not going to talk about how to fix those things. But maybe we're not seeing enough inventory on the table in some instances. Maybe there are too many dragons or heroes on big flying monsters, that kind of thing. You go to any group to do with the game, watch a lot of content, and you'll hear those stories again and again. But what I want to do now is explore a little bit more about who's experiencing that, why they're experiencing that, and can we fix it? Should we fix it, and whose responsibility it is? Now, naturally, much of the commentary we see online based around game balance comes from a place of competitive play or match play. Those people attending events, going to tournaments, or at least aspiring to do so, or wanting to play their games in that way. But for a number of years now, Games Workshop has very clearly focused on their three ways to play systems. So you have match play, but you have narrative play and open play as well. Open play seems to be the strange one that people don't really talk about very much, where it's just stick everything you want on the table and play. And actually, we've all played that way at some point, whether that be in a store, at a games day or something like that, or just with your friends when you have those really big fun games. It's just a super relaxed, just play the game. The rules exist for the units and things, but it doesn't really matter whether the army's balanced or not, as long as you're having fun. Narrative play is a really, really interesting topic in itself, whether your narrative is just within your army, your own lore that you build, but you're still built a very competitive minded list for the tabletop. Narrative can be a huge story where the armies are unbalanced, maybe part of a linked campaign. It can be so many different things to different people. So when people say I'm a narrative gamer, I always raise an eyebrow, because what kind of narrative gamer is that? You can be the best player in the world, #1 ranked, winning events, but also be a really narrative gamer, that you love the narrative of the game and you paint your miniatures and put your heart and soul into it. So it has many degrees of narrative and what it means to different people. But if we're going to give a broad brushstroke to it, we'll say that it's focusing on a story for a particular game, maybe, rather than the lore part underneath. Match play is a little bit more straightforward, but can still exist with many different contexts, because it can mean an event and rules you have for that event where everyone's armies have to conform to those rules, but it may well be just a set of arrangements and agreements that you've made with an opponent to play down the club, that you're playing the same points against each side, and you want a matched game while still being pretty relaxed and maybe even narrative at the same time. So there's no definitive wall between each type of game style. In my opinion, they can overlap a little bit, they can be mixed about, and that makes it a little bit more confusing. In fact, in the main Warhammer Battles section of the main rulebook, pitched battles is the term used to describe what I've been describing as matched play. Campaign battles and narrative battles are mentioned as well, and some people would consider campaigns must be narrative, but I guess you could link games and still be pitched battle related or match played, depending on what you want to call it. As the book goes on to explain campaigns in more detail, focusing further on narrative battles, giving examples of how games masters maybe used tables for forging narrative, I think what it really shows is that the game could be played in many different ways, and the way the game is presented in this book is just as equal for narrative play, for open play, as it is for that more matched, if you excuse the term, way of playing. So how does that all relate to game balance, I hear you ask? Well, mostly I wanted to provide context for the game as a whole, that it is not just a match play or a tournament game. And while much of the media out there, myself included to a certain extent, even though I mostly make painting videos, is around match play, it's commentary on tournaments and events, and we look at the game through the perspective of that kind of style and that kind of balance. And I think that's important, and I'll circle back to that at the end, but I did want to make a heavy nod to the fact that the game is designed as a whole with narrative and open play included in there as well. And we can't just view how well a game is written in terms of balance purely on how it works for a tournament. There will be many people watching this video who will put comments below saying, I don't care about tournaments, I just play with my mates and we make stuff up as we go along and I love this game, etc. And I have an awful lot of sympathy with that. I'm a filthy casual myself and I play a lot of games like that. I also think that game balance is important for another reason, which I'll come to shortly. So let's swing round to match play and game balance. What is a balanced game and what does it mean? Now, I'm sure this could be debated or go down to interpretation as well, but I think it's fairly safe to say that a balanced game is where two sides of equal points have a relatively equal chance of winning the game. I'm sure a few people will snoot and sneer at the next statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. At its core, Warhammer the Old World and any other game like it has had an awful lot of work put into it to make sure that the game is balanced. But of course, there will be things that don't work. And as you release a game into a wider community where there's thousands of people playing the game rather than a smaller handful of playtesters, things do get broken, if we're going to use that phrase. People will find ways of breaking the system, gaming the system, and things that just don't work the way they are designed. Much of that's fixed by an FAQ or explained via an errata. But sometimes not everything is covered. It may well be that just one faction is a little bit more powerful than another one's too weak, or a certain unit type doesn't work as well, or a certain unit type works too well. So what tends to happen in those instances where Games Workshop don't make a fix through an FAQ or something like that, the community has stepped up. And that's something we've seen in loads of previous editions, and especially driven by competitive play and tournaments. And they come in the guise, in most cases, as a comp pack. Now, largely I see that as a positive thing. Some people will see it from a negative point of view, that it's something that Games Workshop has made a mistake with or not fixed, and therefore the community needs to come in and make a fix. Again, going back to that context point of view, that is tournament gamers who have established that there is an issue, that when they're playing tournament games there is a problem. That is not the whole game or the whole community, and that problem may not affect absolutely everyone. So I think it's great when community leaders, people that run a lot of events, getting lots of experience, come up with comp packs and they adjust them. And there are some comp packs that people find are really popular, some really stick and become embedded in the community. And it's often those embedded ones that become really good community support. So in the days of 7th and 8th edition, maybe it was the South Coast GT comp pack that became quite common. A lot of other smaller events would copy that comp because so many players went to that event. It was seen as almost the standard. And that trickles down into casual play as well, to clubs, to people playing at home when they want to play a match game. But they also realise that some of the problems with the match play setup affects their armies, so maybe they'll use those compacts in their home games as well. And I think that's a positive thing rather than a negative thing. Compacts themselves come in many different guises. Some that almost work a bit like a golf handicap in the past, where you get a boost to your tournament score based on what army you've taken and who you've played against. And some there are based on pure restrictions and maxing out number of units or limiting the number of certain things or characters or percentages. Loads of different options. Even the Warhammer World events team have added their own comp to the events they have done previously. The rule of 3, of which you could only have a maximum of 3 of a particular unit type, was first trialled at one of their events, and that's something that spread throughout the community. Interestingly, I don't think it's on their most latest set. I've got a ticket to the Throne of Skulls in February next year, and as you can see, the restrictions they've got there are focused around limiting characters to 25% of your army, so maybe eliminating some of those most powerful Chaos Lord on Dragon builds, and also around Wizards and level 4s and level 3s and the limit for those as well, which stops some of the Wizard spam you may see in certain lists. Or will those restrictions solve some of the problems or perceived problems in the current competitive meta at the moment? Who knows? I'm sure they will help some things. Like all restrictions though, they will miss others, and other things will slip through the net, and the meta just evolves and changes, and something else becomes the problem, which is always worth bearing in mind when we're talking about complete game balance. One of the things that's been talked about over the last few months, I think based on a rumour from another YouTube channel, not mine, is that will Games Workshop try and control the narrative, so to speak, not the narrative games, but control the narrative of the meta a little bit by releasing their own competitive play guide or something like that. Now, we've seen over the last few years that Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar have really kind of nailed down an almost a yearly update on rules, on match play, and all of that kind of stuff. And that competitive scene seems to have taken on lessons from, in my opinion, other companies like Privateer Press with War Machine from years ago, and those definitive, these are your way you play your match play games, these are the scenarios, this is what you should do if you want it to be a sanctioned event, that kind of stuff. You see less of that from the specialist design studio kind of thing, but it doesn't mean they won't go there. A few years ago they released this for Middle-earth strategy battle games, the match play guide, and this is great. So first of all, releasing something like this means that players, though, aren't interested in competitive play can completely disregard it. It means that you don't have to go and change core rules and invalidate books that are already in print. You can make slight adjustments in a match play guide and make suggestions of how competitive games might be handled at events. And maybe that does mean putting a little bit of pressure on a core rule or a little adjustment here or there, but what it doesn't do then is kind of completely undermine what's written as a core rule. That remains the same thing. It's in the book, and that's the way the game is played as standard out of the rule book, but this is just a suggestion from match play point of view. And what kind of thing could we see in a book like this? Well, using the Middle-earth version as an example, it gives an idea of recommended tournament style. It talks about the organizer, the referee, that kind of thing. And I'm sure many of you shouting, we don't need to know how to do that. Event runners are doing this already. Of course they are, but if you're going to produce a publication like this, this kind of thing could be included as well. And it's great for people who have never run a tournament before, and they could use it as a complete guide. They could also include a few restrictions, the kind of things we've seen in event packs, and maybe the rule of 3 will be in there. Maybe they will recommend that the restrictions that we saw on the upcoming Throne of Skulls are in there, so the limit to characters points to 25% and the limit the number of level 4s and level 3s, and that's not changing the core rules, but it's also very cleverly bringing it in for match play as a suggestion. And in the Middle-earth example, it provided a huge amount of extra scenarios, and the scenarios are different and the game is different, and maybe that many wouldn't be required. But also, if you have a few scenarios that require different unit types to maybe score points or to be in a certain position, you can really give the meta a kick. But definitely by adding in some more scenarios, which you're not sure what you're going to get, because if you have a large number of them and you go to an event and thinking, well, I'm only going to play 3 or 5 out of the 12 that are available, you'll have to design an army list that could deal with any of them. And again, that will hopefully have some positive changes in the meta, maybe make some changes that we see some more inventory on the table, that kind of thing. And it's definitely an example of how, but with a soft touch, with an optional touch, you don't change the core rules, but you can have an effect on the competitive mindset, which will filter down to all games. So let's try and meander towards the point, or at least the point I'm trying to make with this video around competitive play and balance, and how I think they're important even for casual players. Now, it's not all casual players. If you play massive games where you're there all day just rolling dice and pushing models forward and the real result doesn't matter, maybe as a big group if you do that, that's extremely casual, extremely open, or extremely narrative play. Great, I love those kind of games, but you probably won't be affected by tournament players anyway. It just won't be on your radar, or you'll think, doesn't apply to me. Where balance and competitive meta does have an effect, I believe, is with what I call casual match play, where people like to play matched points. Maybe it's at a club game, maybe it's at home. Sometimes it's against people that you don't know very well, or maybe not met before, and you arrange in a WhatsApp group or on a Facebook group at your club's forum, and you say, what should we play? What points level? 2,000 points, great. And then you go up for your game and you find out that they're practicing a list for an event in 2 weeks' time, and you've just got your 2,000 point all inventory list because it's your lore and you love it, and you lose and you don't have a good time, and maybe they don't get the kind of game they want either. And that's where the mismatch in balance can sometimes be a problem, and why I think that it is important that it's addressed, whether that's through Games Workshop and the designers or whether that's by the community. And it's in those, what I will call casual match play games, those games you're playing at club night, those games you're playing at the weekend in the store, those games that you're going around to your friend's garage once a week to play, that are more common than playing the big 6,000 beer and pretzel game with 10 of your mates. These are the games that people are playing most often when they're playing Warhammer, the Old World. And I think because of that, they are affected by what's going on in the meta. They are affected by what's going on with net lists, with what's going on with competitive gaming. And therefore, the game balance is important because it will trickle down to those games. So I do hope the Games Workshop bring out something like this, because that guidance will undoubtedly be followed to a certain degree. And I'm sure other rules packs and comp packs will be born from it. But if the core of it is from them and it can fix a few of the issues, that would be great. But if not, then I'm sure a couple of the major events will become settled, become established, and those comp packs will become more developed over time and will become what we play at home as well. And so at the end of the day, game balance does matter. It does trickle down to the more casual play. It's not just a realm of tournament gamers. However, the sky is definitely not falling at the moment. We have a good game and there is nothing there that can't be adjusted by the community. And while I hope Games Workshop can produce something that steers the way a little bit, because I think they can be braver in some ways at tackling some of the issues, especially via scenarios and things like that, I'm not worried if they don't. I think the game's in a good place and we have these conversations that are going on in the internet at the moment with every single edition of the game, and that will never change, and it's one of the things that makes this interesting. And when we have more armies released next year, no doubt that they will change the meta again as well, and we'll see more changes, and I think it's great and I think it's fun. And to end, at the risk of sounding fluffy, Warhammer really is for everyone to enjoy the way they want to at home. So if you're not bothered by tournaments, then don't focus on tournaments. If you want to change rules, change them. There is nothing that says you can't do that. Play the game the way you want to with your friends at home, in club, wherever. I love to see a different variety of play, of different editions and things. It's what makes our gaming hobby fantastic. If you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, drop a comment below. It really helps the video be seen by other people. I appreciate that some of the opinions in the video may not match yours, so just be respectful and mindful of that in the comments. We all have different opinions on this. I'd love to see yours below, but please do keep it respectful. If you're new to the channel, do check out the other videos. It's mostly painting and hobby related stuff. Loads of Warhammer the Old World as well. Some of it commentary like this as well though, and I do cover loads of other gaming systems. There's lots of ways to support the channel if you'd like to. There's affiliate links below, including my Patreon, and I have a Discord as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.